Good morning, all of you.
Morning, sir.
So, the other day we discussed about this deal. Yes, CCA Amazon deal. Do you remember?
Yes.
Non-competent clause. Amazon Big Bazaar. Have I discussed?
Not completely, sir. Just
Sorry. India and all these activities. Okay. So, today we will discuss it in depth. Yes. So first of all, basically for prelims, it's an important dimension. What is Competition Commission of India? Is it a statutory body or a constitutional body?
statutory, quasi-judicial.
It's a quasi-judicial body also. It's a regulatory body. It's a statutory body. In GS paper 2 syllabus, you have these lines. Statutory bodies are regulatory bodies. Now, all of you know the retrospective taxation issue. Retrospective taxation, Vodafone case. Do you remember where taxes are placed from old dates? So to new dates, till old dates to new dates, taxes are being placed. That is retrospective taxation. So what happened because of retrospective taxation? India's image as a good place for business has been damaged. Okay, because of lack of stable policies, India's image to attract foreign direct investment or stable businesses has been affected. So recently we tried to solve that issue by promising that we won't have any retrospective taxations. Carin Vedanta case. Do you remember Carin Vedanta case? Carin, C-A-R-I-N, Carin Vedanta case. Same retrospective taxation. So in that case, what happened is income tax department sold the shares of Carin. Okay, it's a MNC company. It's a UK based company. So we have sold their shares to collect the old taxes, retrospective taxes. Then they won the case saying that retrospective taxation is not applicable. Now they want that money back. So Indian government said, I don't have the money. They said Indian assets abroad will be sold. Okay. Then again, Indian government settled the issue. That means retrospective taxation. Just remember that word, retrospective. Retrospective means, just imagine today is 27th December. Today government will make a bill saying you have to pay taxes from January 1st, 2021. Old dates also you have to pay taxes if you have done something. That is violation of lot of thought process. Okay. In Lakshmi Kant, if you have read it, there is a provision where it says retrospective amendments are not applicable to criminal laws.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember?
Yes, sir. For an old crime committed, they cannot make it.
Not old crime. It's not a crime before that date. Something cannot be made criminal before that date. Say today, for example, driving without helmet in Hyderabad is not illegal. Let's say hypothetically, there is no law which says you have to wear helmet. Tomorrow, the state cannot come and say all the times you went without helmet from January 1st till 26th December, you have to pay taxes. It cannot be done. Amendments cannot be made. Whereas in civil cases, it can be made. Okay, that is something that you read in Lakshmi Kant in polity. Just remember, criminal cases, it cannot be made retrospective. Okay. In the same way, taxation also is not technically suggested to be retrospective. Okay. Now, why are we discussing that retrospective issue? Means policy stability. The term is policy stability. When I want to start business in India, I know that Indian government is like a rock, very, very stable. Yes or no? When Indian government is very, very stable, what will happen? I can plan my business accordingly. But one day Indian government is higher, next day lower, then I cannot construct my building there, right? So that is a problem. In the Competition Commission of India recent judgment, why are we discussing? We are discussing this because the last line. The Competition Commission of India has withdrawn the support for Amazon's investment in Future Coupons Private Limited in December this year. I will tell you the case in a very simple terms, not going into technical details at all. Just remember. Is it visible? Just for understanding sake. Futures Group is nothing but Big Bazaar. Okay, the Big Bazaar group is Futures Group. Bayani, Kishore Bayani's group is Big Bazaar Group. Okay, so Amazon in 2019 made a deal with Big Bazaar. Okay, so as shown here, in 2019, okay, Amazon made a deal with Futures Group, that is Big Bazaar Group. Okay, so what happened in that, while purchasing the group's shares from Kishore Bayani's group, Amazon introduced a clause called as non-compete agreement. Non-compete agreement. That means if Big Bazaar Group wants to sell itself, like the company, okay, it should not sell itself to a competitor of Amazon. A non-compete agreement. Okay, you should not sell your company to some other competing company, especially with my competition. Okay, and second, if you have any issues with our agreement, we will go to Singapore arbitration court, not Indian courts. Okay, that is also mentioned in the rule book. And the third one is, you have to give me the first choice. If you want to sell for money, okay, ask me first, like, are you interested in buying? If I say no, then go for others. Okay, these are the three major things we have to remember for understanding sake. One is non-compete. You cannot sell it to my competition. Second one is Singapore court. The third one is everything was good. Okay, introduced 2020. In 2020, what happened? COVID pandemic happened. So Kishore Bayani's business model was rotation of rupee. If a rupee comes here, rupee is invested back. So he totally works on the floating of money. Okay, he doesn't believe in anything else. He just uses that immediate rupee came, rupee spent. So that is how he expanded the entire empire. Suddenly in COVID, what happened? Entire revenues got squeezed. Okay, no more income. So automatically entire business model has failed. So immediately he wanted 11,000 crore rupees. So he thought of someone. Who should I call? Richest person in India, Ambani. Are you interested in buying? Obviously, Ambani is very interested in buying Big Bazaar. Why? Big Bazaar have 10,000 offline outlets. Okay, he immediately said yes. Phone pay kar diya. Okay, okay. So he said immediate yes. So Ambani was very interested in buying the Big Bazaar. But and then Amazon, remember, its non-compete clause. So this is first agreement. This is new agreement. New agreement between whom? Big Bazaar and Reliance. So then Amazon said this agreement is violation of non-compete principle. Why? You did not ask me. You did not tell me. You informed. You sold it to my competitor. So violation of all the clauses. Then Amazon took Big Bazaar to Singapore court. As you remember, Singapore court gave judgment in favor of Amazon. Obviously, right? Even Delhi High Court gave judgment in favor of Amazon. So all these things were happening. Now in December 2020, Competition Commission of India came and said this agreement is void. Okay, the very first agreement between whom? Amazon and Big Bazaar. If it is void, then this agreement is legal. Yes or no? If that is void, then this agreement becomes legal. Okay, so this is what Competition Commission of India has done in December 2020. Okay, it cancelled the, or it withdraw the approval of the first agreement. So if I remove the first agreement, then Singapore court case is wasted, Delhi court is wasted. This agreement becomes valid. Okay, so that is what is happening. Now, what is there for us to deal? It is for the first time Competition Commission of India has withdrawn a appeal for merger and acquisitions or approval of deals. That means every company in India, if it wants to purchase a stake in some other company, big companies, they have to take the blessings of Competition Commission of India, mergers and acquisitions, agreements, anti-competitive practices, and all those things. Okay, the rumor is that it will favor Reliance. So UPSC, we don't need what style of new headache for Indian government, that FDI companies or foreign direct investments or MNCs might think that, you know, if I go and acquire an Indian company, I may not have a long-term guarantee that I will be the owner of that particular deal. Okay, and second thing, the reasons given by Competition Commission of India are little bit on a gray side. Why gray side? They said when Amazon has purchased some percent of the shares in Big Bazaar, it did not tell us that it is planning to buy entire Big Bazaar. Okay, as a business person, even I know commonsensically, if somebody is buying some company, they have a future interest in that company. Yes or no? If I don't have any future interest in that company, why will I bring the non-compete clause? Okay, sell whatever you want to do. It's as simple as that. The moment I introduce non-compete clause, I'm having a long-term vision. Yes or no? It's pure common sense. But Competition Commission of India is saying Amazon has, you have a future plan of acquiring offline retail also. Okay, so it's a subjective, it's a skeptical tone, right? So we have to discuss. I mean, that is the reason. Okay, now.
Amazon is a foreign company, and Big Bazaar is an Indian company. So the deal between them is non-compete. Now, Indian side is coming and saying that this is void. How can that happen? Because a foreign company and Indian company are interacting, and the foreign law should be governing.
No. When you come to India, okay, you can have an agreement that I can solve the issue in international court. But within India, if you have to join hands, you need blessings of Indian regulator. Let's say Airtel. Let's say Airtel is mixing with Walmart. Okay, Walmart is a foreign company. Airtel is an Indian company. Both of them are trying to meet or do a business together. So that deal should be approved by Competition Commission of India. Okay, it is a power of Competition Commission of India. Okay, so just as I was about to say, if you see the business, India have a 1.2 trillion retail market. Okay, I mean, overall market is $1.2 trillion. Okay, out of it, just 7% is online. Even today, so if Amazon wins or Reliance wins this thing, okay, they will have a 10,000 offline stops overnight. That's a huge advantage for such huge companies. Okay, so that is the core issue. Just imagine the size. Indian economy size is $3 trillion. Our just retail market size itself is 1.2 trillion. Out of it, only 7% is online. So if you want to capture Indian market, you need both offline and online market. So if Amazon is already having a good online presence. If Amazon has offline presence also, it will create a hybrid market. You can order online, collect offline. It is right now also there, but Big Bazaar is better. Okay, I hope you understand. And at the same time, Indian e-commerce market is also bound to expand exponentially. Presently, we have only $38 billion. Soon it will go to $200 billion. Just imagine in few years how much growth is happening. $200 billion. It's a huge amount of money. So that is why these people are fighting with each other very vehemently. So basically, Competition Commission Act, India Act have some provisions. What are they? Anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant position. This is something you must have heard. What is abuse of dominant position? Famous case. I'm not aware. The act prohibits anti-competitive agreements. Okay, that we understand. It prohibits. How? Any case?
The opportunity to take over any small company with its power.
Then, as you have rightly mentioned, it's opportunity. It's an advantage, right? Rather than anything else.
But it will be a damage for the small company. Like it is abusing its power.
Unless there is a case, we cannot call it so. Okay, it has an opportunity, but it is not. The famous case is Google and Microsoft case. There was a case in international arena where Microsoft is installing its browser. It is forcing all the people to use its default browser. XP. What is the browser?
Edge.
Edge. Before that, Explorer, right? Internet Explorer. So Microsoft is pushing people to use this, so it is abusing its dominant position. The best example is your smartphones. Google Android. All Androids have default Google Pay app. Yes or no? Search engine is by default Google. So it is abuse of dominant position. So it is forcing the companies to pre-install all these apps. Only then I will give you the OS freely or give you the updates freely. So that kind of ecosystem is created by Google. Abuse of dominant position. Okay. Next, acquisitions. One company by company, mergers and acquisition. Two companies coming together. For all these things, whose blessings are needed? Competition Commission of India's blessings are needed. Okay. So this is the major theme so far. Now Amazon is planning to go to court against Competition Commission of India. So Competition Commission of India versus Amazon India Private Limited will be a landmark judgment probably in future. Okay. The term is policy stability. Now, if you take a patriotic stand, you should say that all companies have to accept Indian rules. If it is really mistake on the part of Amazon, then it does not matter how big the company is, it should be definitely punished. Okay.
That there is a foreign company and an Indian company, if they're having an agreement, should that be registered in CCI? Now what, or was it there?
It was there earlier also.
No, CCI did know about the agreement between
Okay.
and how can they tell it's void now after knowing that?
It's that is a gray area, right? They are saying future. So you did not mention that line. So out of all the 1,000-page documents you have given, you forgot few lines. So that is why I'm canceling your agreement. So it's a gray area. Why? It's right and it's wrong. Both are equally true, right? So that comes under a gray area. If it's black and white, then it's clear-cut case.
No, only those which were not known to CCI will be termed as void, or the entire agreement?
Entire agreement is void. Because of that, entire building will collapse. Okay. This we have discussed.
In Amazon and
I have mentioned it in the PDF. Yes. Okay. So Singapore International Arbitration Court Agreement has been mentioned. Non-compete group, the right of first refusal pact. This and this are the points. Okay. Non-compete clause and a right to first refusal pact. That means you should give me the first opportunity. If I reject, then you have the choice to sell to anyone else. That is called as right to first refusal. Okay, and it's a common terminology. This we have seen the other day. I orally told you the base summary. Today we will try to cover the same way. I have showed you this picture also, right? Yes. You remember all the countries?
Yes, sir.
The other day we were discussing about encircling of Pakistan, encircling of India. Okay. Yes. Good governance. So Amit Shah has released index called as Good Governance Index. Yesterday was a Good Governance Day. Day before yesterday, 25th December is Good Governance Day. It is celebrated in the memory of Atal Bihari Vajpayee and also coincides with
Christmas.
Yes, Christmas. Okay. So what is good governance? Why good governance is very important? Before we enter into the technical details, why are your basic understanding of what is good governance? Governance, all of you know. Then what is good governance? First of all, what is the meaning of governance?
Facilitation
Of effective implementation of schemes is governance. Okay. Policy making and its implementation is governance. Okay. Yes.
Teaching people to the most transparent.
Reaching people, okay, through the most transparent way. Okay. Yes. Basically, what is governance? In GS paper 2, there is a word governance. Governance. I will read governance. What is governance?
Policy is made.
Hmm.
Now the means adopted by the executive machinery to execute it is governance.
That is public service delivery. The means adapt.
Yes.
The tools is governance.
So like I heard an example
Hmm.
where beneficiaries who were not meant to be, they were ghost beneficiaries.
Hmm.
So the particular state government to eliminate the
Hmm.
beneficiaries
Hmm.
in front of every home to which it has already delivered the service, it wrote ye garib hai.
Mhm.
So such kind of
That is the worst way of treating anything, right? Ek garib hai is like, violation of Article 21. I would have sued them in Supreme Court.
yes, sir. To move away the ghost beneficiaries, this was
That's the idea, right? A garib hai is like violation of my dignity. If I was aware Indian, I would have definitely filed the case in Supreme Court. I will discuss about that. I understood what you are trying to say. Yes. ఏం అర్థమైతే అది చెప్పండి, మొహమాటం ఏం లేదు. డోంట్ థింక్ అబౌట్ అదర్స్. Ruling the people in a better way. Okay, simple. Yes, Uma?
So usage of so providing public utilities and services in a very smoother fashion is governance.
Come again.
So providing public utilities in a much more easier and smoother way is governance.
There will be some institutes, the government that those functions of government.
Okay. Governance. Think about it. Is there any link between fundamental rights and governance? Bhuvishri? Fundamental rights and governance. Yes.
fundamental rights for like not to force out of good governance.
Out of good governance. Okay. Yes. Kirtana?
When government does not go against any fundamental rights of any individual. Then
So all of you have pen and papers, right? Just think about fundamental rights. Okay, write the word fundamental rights FR and put a circle around it. Okay, and then put a term G next to it, G, and put a round around it. Okay, try to make a link which leads to it. G leads to FR or FR leads to G. According to Bhuvishri, as of now, our understanding is G leads to FR. Because of G, there is FR. Sorry? Okay. Governance. Okay. Because of governance, we have created something called as fundamental rights.
So can I put it this way? Both are complementary to each other.
Both are complementary to each other. Okay.
Good governance cannot exist without granting of fundamental rights. And in second ARC summary, and in and one of the members of that second ARC has the in Vivekananda International Foundation. they mention about governance,
Hmm.
what Mahabharata talks about governance. I- if I-
Shanti Parma of Mahabharata
Yes, sir.
says a lot of thing about governance. Okay, so Bhishma teaches Yudhishthira on how to govern people.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
So there is a quote
Hmm.
that I read yesterday itself.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in governance is realized all the forms of renunciation. In
Hmm.
governance is combined all knowledge.
Hmm.
In governance is center all the worlds.
Hmm.
This is one good way of looking at it.
Okay, so we'll come to that, right? The simplest way to understand governance is a tool that is originating out of fundamental rights. Opposite is true. I, as a citizen of India, have fundamental right called as right to life, which is Article 21. So Article 21 has been written in the Constitution. It says right to so I have a right to life. Okay, but I am not in a position to have food because of various things: disaster, flood, poverty, disability. 10,000 reasons I am not having food. So I have right to life. I also have right to food. So right to life, one extension is right to food. So I am not in a position to eat food. So whose obligation is it to provide me food? State's obligation. Why? Fundamental rights are a limitation on the state. So because I have a fundamental right called as right to food, it is putting a burden on whom? State to do what? To provide me food. How is state doing that? State has created something called as National Food Security Act. Okay, so National Security Act is an outcome of fundamental right. It's a manifestation of constitutionalism. I hope you understand. So Food Security Act is a manifestation or reality of fundamental rights in action. Okay, so that delivery is governance. But why that delivery is not governance, but the delivery to give full meaning to what again? Right to life. Okay, right to life is leading to food security. Food security is leading to right to meaningful life. So it's like a complete cycle. So the ultimate full potential right to sleep. Supreme Court gives a judgment that after 10 p.m. you should not use loudspeakers. Okay, right to education. Right to Education Act. Like this, everything leads back to full life. So what I'm trying to do is give full meaning to the word right to life, not in one dimension, complete dimension. So if I have right to life in all the senses, okay, like food, healthy life, breathing, good air. Yes or no? Right to life also includes my ability to breathe good air. So Delhi government will pass special act saying that air has to be purified. Okay, so the ultimate objective is to give that capability to the citizen to live up to his best or full life. That full life is governance. Okay, not any one thing. You cannot separate one thing. See, everything else is service delivery. All this is public service delivery. But giving this is governance. Governance is an ecosystem rather than a destination. Governance is a mindset. Governance is a thought process. Creates that atmosphere. Creating that atmosphere is governance. Whatever you do to create that atmosphere are tools. Public service delivery is a tool. Okay, ghost beneficiary elimination is a tool to provide what? To create an ecosystem where everybody will flourish. Okay, the simplest smart way to eliminate ghost beneficiary is biometric authentication, which Aadhaar has been done. Okay, so 10,000 other ways are there. You can call them randomly to come and show up. All those things have been done. So ghost beneficiaries is a thing of past thanks to DBT, Jam Trinity, right? Jantan Aadhaar Mobile. Okay, now coming back, all of you understood, right? Capability. I have to create that atmosphere where you will flourish to the best of your abilities. Clear? So, and the link is because of fundamental rights, we are doing all these things. Because of fundamental rights, I'm doing everything else. Okay. So we'll try to see some definitions so that next time there won't be any subjectivity. Always remember, try to reduce the subjectivity in definitions. If there is a proper thing, governance, good governance, there are already standard definitions given by international institutions. If you can observe the essence of those definitions also, that will make your life very, very easier. So if you see the first two lines, it is the definition of governance. You didn't get the FR. Hmm. Hmm.
If fundamental rights will give rise to good government.
Hmm.
So, but in USA, fundamental rights were given to the citizens much later than their independence.
Hmm.
Does that mean there was no government?
See, it's like arguing before constitution there were no rights. Fundamental rights are just codification of societal morality. Even before codification of laws, we have a concept called as morality. Even if you go to villages, even in tribal hamlets, even in tribes which practices cannibalism, they will have a set of rules. Okay, so that set of rules are fundamental for this hamlet or this village. Okay, there is a set of rules, and that is basic. From that is emanating the governance part. Okay, let's take about it. In olden, yes. Mhm.
But now, who will set the set of rules? So isn't that part of governance? That's my question. Now,
No, that is not part of governance. That is part of constitutionalism. We have to set the ground rules, right? Okay, that is more about administration. That is more about defining. See, your question is who decided these are the set of fundamental rights?
the governance part.
No, that is not the governance part. That is the administration part. That is a state policy making part. First, we have to have a state. Then the rules on how the state should function. So how the state should function is governance. What should be in the state is state policy making. That is the core societal theories. Okay, you got the point. United Nations Human Rights 1948 also have fundamental rights. As I said, every tribe, every hamlet, every village will have its own subset of rules. So not all fundamental rights are codified. Whatever we read are codified. There are uncodified also, right? In society, we practice all these things without actually knowing the constitution. Also, society, as ethics says, codified morals are laws. Only when you give a legal backing, that is moral. Before constitution also, we know all these things. As I have mentioned, in Shanti Parva it is there, in Arthashastra it is there, in Buddhist texts it is there. So governance is not something new. Governance is age immemorial. Yes. Understood the first definition of governance? Define the environment which permits, enable individuals to rise their capability levels, provide opportunities, and give them the freedom to live up to their best potential possible, and set of choices. If I want to just sleep under a tree, not doing anything, I should have that kind of environment. Okay, yes or no? Whatever I want to do, I want to become an Indian Idol, I should have that freedom. If I want to study, I should study. Imagine someone born in the poorest family, in a tribal family. Okay, state is providing them free education, health access, medical facilities, scholarships. If you are meritorious, I mean, if you can prove you deserve a scholarship, higher education colleges, yes, lack of no fees in application for government exams or other things. So all these are state providing amenities to give you that capability, potential to live up to your best potential. So that is governance. Okay, when you come to good governance, World Bank's definition or UNDP definitions again reinforces what is governance. All we have added is the word good, but small changes. What are that small changes? Adding the two words transparency and accountability, and rule of law. Okay, transparency, accountability, and rule of law. So in 1991, when India was supposed to go for liberalization, good governance is a rule set by World Bank and IMF. You also have to promote good governance. Okay. So what is the problem of before good governance? Before good governance or liberalization also there was governance, but there was high amount of corruption. There is there is no focus on outcomes. There is no focus on transparency. It was self-aggrandizing system. That means money is going into the system. Who is getting rich? Who is going to get poor? No, nobody is bothered about it. In good governance, we need to promote accountability, transparency, and rule of law. Everybody should get the benefits. So that's the most important thing that we have introduced. Governance, good governance, e-governance. Yes or no? It's a logical extension. Governance, good governance, and e-governance. So governance had some issues. When I said governance in Shanti Parva, when Bhishma Pitamaha says something, okay, he assumes that society will be kind of ethical, but he was also very pragmatic to know what is future generations going to do. Okay, so then till 1990s, people followed more or less governance in their own understanding. They were not bothered about the outcome-based orientation system. Then we have improved it into good governance. Good governance also have a lot of problems like accountability and transparency. Umang is an IAS officer. I will say you have to do your work honestly. She said I am doing so. But how will I know? There are some loopholes because corruption in kind or cash cannot be in kind especially cannot be proved. Okay, corruption in cash can be proved, but in kind means it cannot be proved. So then the problem is solved through e-governance, technology as a hairbringer of solution. If I bring technology into everything, for example, from Food Corporation of India go down to public delivery service shops. Okay, the entire route is GPS. I will know whether the truck is going from FCI to that shop or is it taking a detour to go down. That is e-governance. Attendance. Government teachers are not coming to the schools. What is the best way? Biometric attendance. Okay, I told you, right? So all this is the solution through e-governance. Okay, next RFID tags. That is also e-governance. So like this, everything will make your life easier. E-rupee eliminates ghost beneficiaries. Okay, if I give a voucher to Kantamma has to go to the particular shop, provide Aadhaar card and get her service delivery. So a ghost beneficiary, Kantamma's real name is Subbarao. Okay, there is no Kantamma, only Subbarao exists. Then he cannot go to the shop and say, I am Kantamma. Yes, ghost beneficiary is eliminated. So technology eliminates a lot of problems in good governance. It promotes accountability, transparency, and rule of law. So with usage of blockchain technology and the latest developments, it will make life easier as an administrator. So a lot of corruption will be reduced. So trains never used to run in time. Now you exactly know where your train is using a GPS locator. So that is also the promotion of e-governance or good governance through technology. E is delivery of online. Good governance can be made better through technology. Two different things. Not all E is good governance. Good governance can use technology. E-governance is delivery of services through online platforms. Okay. Then the next logical extension of e-governance is I again remember the next logical extension of good governance is
E-governance,
confusing.
people-centered.
All the sort of old terms. Good governance. See, there is governance, there is good governance. We have added a aside called as e-governance. E-governance can apply here and here also. Anything you done on electronic platform is governance. E-governance, electronic governance. So what is the next logical step of good governance?
Better.
So one more aside can Jan Bhagidari or Jan people's participation or Jan Bhagidari is one more aside, not the logical extension. So what should be the next logical extension of good governance? Convergence. What is convergence? All, not only departments, every department has to work together. See, right now, electricity department is getting efficient, okay, or water department is getting efficient or something like that. Then all the departments working together is convergence. Think about it. As I told you, if I have to solve the poverty problem, not only one department has to work, all the departments have to work together. So if you see Gati Shakti, if you see PM Poshan, Poshan Abhiyan, all these are convergence. That means governance is there, good governance is also there. Now we are trying to converge all the governance models. Okay, so that means all the departments will come together and start working on a single problem. Ministry of Jal Shakti, that is also convergence. Not 10,000 departments, only one department. Minister of Education, convergence. So convergence is the next logical extension of good governance. Okay. See, e-governance, Jan Bhagidari is all part and parcel of governance only. So it's what we call as whole of government approach. Whole of government approach. That means everyone is working for the same problem. Sometimes we have to work that with whole of society approach. Whole of government working with whole of society. So that is how you solve some problems. Like for example, COVID pandemic. I cannot work without your help as a system. If people are not wearing masks, I cannot solve the problem, right? So whole of government approach is all departments coming together plus all the society also coming together. When society and government comes together, that is how we solve a lot of problems. Understood? Yes. So as I have mentioned, there are a lot of constitutional provisions which pushes the state to promote governance. It's your obligation. It's the obligation on the state to work for the citizens' welfare. So good governance emanates from obligations on the state. All of you know the keywords, right? Accountability, transparency, responsive. What is responsive? Responding to the issues. Okay. Participatory, consensus oriented, follows rule of law, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive. What is the meaning of the third point and seventh point? What is the difference between effective and efficient? What is responsive? Okay, so I have given some application. Okay, you have said yes, I have received the application. Responsive. That's responsive only, right? No. I have given an application in a government office that I have a problem. They said we have received your application.
Implementation
Okay.
of the green, like the loophole,
Mhm.
is actually responsive.
Implementation of the loophole.
I mean, implementation of
Hmm.
the policy to remove that loophole is
Implementation of the policy. What is responsiveness? Responsiveness is something that emanates from empathy and compassion. Responsiveness is something that emanates from empathy and compassion. That is value driven systems. That is good governance. Okay, responsiveness comes from that value driven system. You don't only say that I have received the application, you understand the seriousness or the gravity of that particular situation and you respond accordingly. That is responsive. For example, you let's say if you give an application, the minimum response, I mean the maximum response time is 30 days. Within 30 days they have to solve your problem. On the 29th day afternoon they will solve your problem. Okay, really it is correct, you cannot file any complaint against them. Why? 30 days is the maximum time, I have solved on 29th day afternoon. What is the big deal? That is not responsiveness. Responsiveness is if you're actually free, if you're capable to do that within half day, have you solved it in half day of the receiving of the application? That only comes through value system. Yes or no? Or else you can write something called as citizen charters. Citizen charters will say after filing an application within 14 days your problem will be solved. On 13th day afternoon you will get a call, your work is done, come. So that is not responsiveness. Okay, next, effective and efficient. What is effective and efficient? Are these two terms mentioned in your ethics syllabus, GS paper 4? Sure. How sure are you? Probity of governance, GS paper 4. What is mentioned?
Concept of public service, philosophical basis of governance and probability. Information sharing and
On the last, there is a line. Before case studies, there are 8 or 9 words.
yes, citizens charter.
Efficient utilization of public funds.
Yes, sir. Utilization of public funds. Challenges to corruption.
So there is an effectiveness. Effective, it is mentioned. Okay, you are saying. Okay, what is effective? Effective means at the grassroots level, it is solving a problem in reality. Efficient means you are doing it in the least amount of cost possible. Okay, so efficient is more of a quantitative term. Efficient is outcome based term. Okay, you have to do something and you have to do it in the least expensive fashion. Yes or no? Okay, equitable and inclusive, these are the core pillars of good governance. Now, what are the barriers of good governance? Apathy, indifferent attitude of bureaucrats. What is indifferent attitude? Whatever I have said. On the 13th day afternoon, anyhow, my work is to sign the application. I signed it before the 13th day. That is apathy. Lack of accountability. That is also a hindrance to good governance. See, this cannot be an issue because, I mean, it cannot be solved because discretion is a powerful tool. If you don't give discretion, system will collapse. If you give discretion, accountability will always suffer. What is discretion?
Choice to take a decision.
It's the ability to take the decision based on existing ground level facts. You see some person, you want to go include them in the BPL list. Okay, so it should be the criteria or it should be the decision, final decision of the district collector to whether to include that person in the list, yes or no. Okay, if I purely go by the rule book, I will throw half of them outside. If I don't follow the rule book, 1 or 2 people might enter into the system. 1 or 2 people who doesn't deserve to be in the list might also enter into the list. So which one is better, excluding half or including the 2? That is discretion. Okay, so that is purely discretion. So if I remove discretion, accountability will increase, but system will collapse. But if I allow discretion, accountability might suffer. Okay, so that is a problem with accountability arguments. It's very easy to say, difficult to implement. Yes. Red tapeism, purely following the rule book or hiding behind the rules and regulations. That file is not there, this sign is not there, you get that document, this document. So you cite 10,000 rules. The 10,000 rules citing is called as red tapeism. Okay. Citizens, inactive implementation of laws and rules. Okay. So what should be done to promote good governance? According to second ARC, we have to make it citizen centric. Jan Bhagidari, Jan Andolan. Yes, citizen centric approach, making citizens part of decision making. For example, putting the draft of all the public policies in the public domain is also citizen centric. I am making it the draft available to the citizens. So if they have any complaints, they can participate in the discussion itself. Okay. Next one is adaptation of modern technology that all of you know. Right to information, all of you know. RTI Act, citizen charters. What are citizen charters? Have you been to a bank, post office recently?
Yes.
Have you been to a bank? In the bank, there will be a blue color big board. If you apply for DD, 25 minutes. If you apply for a passbook, 2 days. So like this, within the stipulated time. Citizen charter, the most outdated, useless model ever. Okay, but it is a very, very important topic in ethics according to a lot of people, but not me. Okay. So why? UPSC has not asked a single question on citizen charter. Even UPSC knows it's a useless model. The logical extension to citizen charter is, say, always remember, second ARC was passed in 2005 to 2008. We have passed 10 to 12 years. Public service delivery bills. Arvind Kejriwal, Jagan Mohan Reddy, all these people are delivering public services to the homes. Free home public service delivery, right? If I ask for a birth certificate, they will come to my home and deliver it, just like Amazon. Municipalities will come and deliver the birth certificate or death certificate at your own homes. So that is delivery at home. Okay. So public service delivery bill. What is public service delivery bill? Instead of saying that, you know, in 11 days, you have to do something, which is citizen charter, it will legally back it. If you don't deliver it in 11 days, you have to pay 25,000 rupees fine or something, which is there in, you know, citizen charter also, which is not implemented. But public service delivery bill gives legal backing to put the pressure on the government departments. Sixth one, have you heard about it ever? Grievance redressal mechanism. What are grievance redressal mechanisms? Consumer courts are one way of grievance redressal, but in every department they need to have grievance redressal mechanisms. Ombudsman is technically not exactly a grievance redressal mechanism, right? Ombudsman is more of Lokpal and Lokayukta. They're more like a, you know, supervisors or a moral compass to the departments. For example, ombudsman is it's a Scottish term, right? It says, I'm the watchman, I'm the supervisor. I will watch whether the society is going in the moral direction or not. Whereas grievance redressal is like a problem solver. Within the department, I have an issue. Okay. So ombudsman is more or less used in the term of corruption and all those things. Grievances may not be only corruption, right? Grievances may be 10,000 other things. Okay. Active citizen participation, private public partnership. So all these things have to be done to promote good governance. Now these things will be learned in GS paper 2 governance and also applicable to your ethics paper. Ethics also you have the same things. Good governance. It's a very, very old topic, but it's a evergreen topic because from Mahabharata times we are struggling to provide good governance. There was a multi-dimensional poverty index by Niti Aayog. Yes. What is the need for having a multi-dimensional poverty index? Normally, what do you understand by poverty? Same question. What is poverty? Yes. What is poverty? People not able to meet their daily needs. Okay. Like mm-hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yes. What is poverty? Poor. Poor people are poverty. Okay, poverty is equal to poor. So who are poor? People who are not able to. Hmm. Like. Hmm. Hmm. Roti, kapda, or makan. Hmm. Hmm. Indira Gandhi. Then what else? Wi-Fi, Geo. No, that is not poor. That is not essential. Can you live without Wi-Fi? Geo. Right? I have Airtel connection, sir. No? Yes. Santosh? Who are poor? So all of you are saying that daily needs are basic needs, but none of you are telling what are basic needs. These three things are basic needs. Yes, Anuhya? Lack of resources is poor. Okay. Yes, Narayan? Okay. So here you are saying full potential. If someone is not reaching their full potential, it's poor. They are poor. Okay. Yes. Hmm. Basic needs. Yes, Umang? Hmm.
So, lack of availability of quality basic.
Lack of availability of quality basic needs. Mhm. Yes, Pratisha? Mm-hmm. Of what? Okay. Yes. Yes. You don't have any idea? It's already discussed. What is on the board is there. Huh?
More or less, but I want to say what are those basic needs?
Hmm.
Health, education, and basic living standards.
Hmm.
Living standards in the sense access to water, access to food,
Hmm.
access to housing,
Hmm.
and if I can say sanitation.
Hmm.
So
Again, the same things, right? Who is stopping me from writing Wi-Fi?
no, sir. It is why.
Why? I think, if I don't have Wi-Fi, I'm poor. If I don't have smartphone, I'm poor. Clothing. Okay. Branded or unbranded? Why? Luxury. Branded is luxury. Maybe. Okay. So education. Digital education? So for education, if you agree, without education you are poor. I am saying that without Wi-Fi you cannot get education nowadays. So Wi-Fi is a basic need. No. Lot of people have smartphones. Yet they have BPL cards also. Okay. They are poor. Hmm.
That is a parameter for putting people into APL.
Okay. So again, even middle class families think they are poor. Okay, poor is a state of mind, right? Or being poor is a state of mind. Whereas when we say poverty, poverty is more or less purely in economic terms. Most of the times, whenever you say poverty, you are talking in subjective terms. As I have mentioned, all these are subjective. Even Wi-Fi is subjective, food is subjective, health is subjective. Yes or no? Everything is subjective. So as long as you think in subjective terms, it's very difficult to codify that or put it on the paper or argue empirically. He did not come back because he doesn't know how to justify that, Wi-Fi is a luxury term, right? It's a subjective argument.
No, sir, I was waiting, but
Mhm.
there is something called relative poverty and absolute poverty.
Again, relative poverty does not work in India, right? Relative poverty works in Western countries because I can compare very clearly. Whereas in India, it's a subjective poverty.
No, sir,
Hmm.
like, if we see present day families,
Hmm.
they have 17 inch TV, we have 55-inch TV, so we are poor. That's something relative poverty.
And that's a state
That's
of
a
mind.
state of mind.
Exactly.
So, but in absolute poverty,
Hmm.
so what I was talking is about absolute poverty terms.
Okay. So what I wanted to tell is, whenever someone says poverty, we take Indian government stand of what is poverty first. Okay, it's like putting a wall. Okay, or it's like putting a plate on the table. Okay, it's like reducing the scope of discussion. Okay, if it is sticking, your argument is okay. If it is not, then it can be discussed. We don't want to spoil the entire table, right? Okay, the moment you put a plate, so that is reducing the subjectivity. That means objective. Always remember this. It applies in everything, whether ethics answers, GS answers, or anything. First, put a objective definition, then benchmark it. I hope you understand. So, for example, what is happiness? According to UNDP or according to UN, this is happiness. Then everything I write is a measurement to that particular definition. Okay. In the same way, when I say poverty, instead of using our own thought process, which is very subjective in nature, you put it according to Government of India, this is poor. Then whatever you discuss, okay, will be bouncing to that particular idea because you won't deviate from the core. So what is definition of poverty according to Indian government? So in a city, if you can spend more than 33 rupees per day, in a city, if you can spend more than 33 rupees per day, that means within that 33 rupees, if you can get Wi-Fi, food, accommodation, everything, basically government does not consider you as the wheat, flour, rice, whatever is your staple diet, shampoo packets. So like this, they will create a list of items. So every month, let's say I have to spend 1,000 rupees to purchase all these things. 20 rupees of oil, 2 rupees of shampoo packets per month. Like this, it will put all the basket and it will create a 1,000 rupee basket or something. So then divide it by 30 days. So what is the average amount? Okay, let's say hypothetically 33 rupees. Okay, so if a person can spend 1,000 rupees per month or 33 rupees per day, he is not considered as poor. So poor in India are those who are not even in a position to spend 33 rupees or 27 rupees per day, according to the good baskets that are decided by the government. Okay, this was decided way back in 2011-12 Suresh Tendulkar committee report. Okay, Suresh Tendulkar committee report says this. According to that benchmark, 22% of Indians cannot even spend 33 rupees per day. Okay, 22% of Indians cannot even spend 33 rupees per day or 27 rupees per day. Just imagine 27 rupees per day just to survival. Okay, that is a objective benchmark. The next is Rangarajan committee report. Rangarajan committee reports expands this data by saying 47 rupees per day in urban area, whereas 32 rupees in spend 47 rupees or more in urban area, he is rich, or I mean above poverty line. He's not, he's above poverty line, he's not under BPL. Okay, so this is the benchmark, but this is purely money terms. Yes or no? So let's say he's eating. Is he alive? Yes. Is he above poverty line? Yes. My work is done. Why? For a government point of view, it does not complicate my life. I have set a clear-cut benchmark, and then I am saying, okay, all these people are not poor. So under my rule, India has less poor. Discussion over. Okay. So is keeping someone alive the objective of governance, or to empower them is the objective of governance? Empower. Just now we have discussed that capability approach, right? You have to do the 360-degree point of view. So keeping alive is not the point. Keeping them healthy and giving them opportunity to thrive is important. So how do I measure that? Through this data, I cannot measure. So that is why governments have brought in various parameters called as multidimensional poverty index or human developmental index. So there I will measure various parameters. Now all the points mentioned by Suman there also. Health, education, and standard of living. These are the basic. If you see, even bank account is a parameter. Just like Wi-Fi, if you don't have a bank account in today's world, that promotes a lot of problems. Okay, so health, nutrition, we have discussed cognitive tax multiple times. Okay, if you are not having a healthy body and a healthy mind, there is no way that human capital will improve. So you are poor in that sense. Child mortality, antenatal care, or in years of schooling, school of attendance. Okay, why school of attendance? For example, if someone is going to the school on a regular basis, he is healthy, he or she is healthy, there are no problems, there are no push and pull factors, the family is allowing them to build that capability. So if the school attendance is falling, then there is a problem. Yes, so like this we have to measure how people are working. Then cooking fuel is also a parameter. If your family is using LPG, then your family is better off. They won't develop health issues, they won't develop any long-term complications. Today you are using traditional cooking methods, then you are developing lung issues and all those things, then your health is spoiled. What is the point, right? Sanitation. Why sanitation? Sanitation and poverty has a close link. They are like the two sides of the same coin, right? If sanitation is not there, malaria, diarrhea, typhoid, dengue, they will push people again into poverty. Wherever poor are there, there is sanitation. Wherever there is no sanitation, there is poverty. It's like a vicious cycle. So if I am also solving poverty problem. That is what is convergence approach. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan will reduce poverty. Okay. Drinking water. Har Ghar Jal. Har Ghar Jal. Jal or null approach. So again, providing tap water to all the households. Why water? Because through water only a lot of diseases will be transmitted. Electricity provides capability. Housing improves capability, living standards, assets, and bank accounts. Okay. And again, as I told you, if you remember, high entry barrier, low exit barrier concept. High entry barrier, low exit barrier. Do you remember? High entry, low exit. According to this report, around 50% of the population in Bihar are poor. Multi-dimensional poverty. This report, 50% of Bihar population is poor. Okay, what is high entry barrier and low exit barrier? See, just imagine this high entry. So if you have to enter this, you have to climb a very high wall. But if you have to exit, the gate for outside is very low, but for inside the gate is very high. High entry, low exit. If you read this line, so if you want to be included, see this between these two, high entry and low entry, this is your multidimensional poverty. So if you have to stay in between these two lines, okay, you need to climb a very high gate, but I will kick you out as soon as possible. So what does this line say? The household does not own more than one of these. If you have radio, TV, okay, telephone, computer, not more than one. If I have TV, computer and telephone, I'm not considered poor. So right now I only have TV. All houses have TVs. Tomorrow if I buy something, let's say a motorbike, I have TV and a motorbike, I'm kicked out. So I'm no longer considered as multidimensionally poor. High entry barrier, low exit barrier. Even with such low exit barriers, 50% of Bihar population is poor. Understand the forms.
But, the value they have given, when they quantified it, is just by 21 over 1.
Again, the thing is,
It's 0.00.
no. You're purely thinking in statistical terms. That is not the condition. Just imagine a family, if it can afford a TV and a bike. Okay, they must be doing something. Normally, see, imagine a really poor family. A poor family does not have the luxury. Let's imagine someone living in a shed or a tented house. Okay, all these watchmen people, all these people will be there, right? So they don't have any proper homes. Okay, so they're having a TV. Okay, someone might give them a bike for temporary reason, but if you are having a capability to buy your own bike, mobile, everything, so people are doing kind of okay. It's not like they are poor, right?
No, sir. I'm talking about this 50% thing. They calculated out of this score only, no, sir. If they're according to this, if it is less than 0.33 out of 1, then they are
Multidimensional.
0.33, whatever that is contributing, is just 0. Something 00.
Hmm,
So just having more than 2 assets is not that. I mean, I don't say that's a high entry barrier. Yeah.
That is exactly for SCCC also. Socioeconomic caste census also, that is a barrier. Automatic inclusion. Okay, automatically your Aadhaar cards will be removed from the system. Automatic exclusion concept. Automatic inclusion, automatic exclusion. All Safai Karamchari families are automatically considered as BPL. Automatic inclusion. By default, all Safai Karamchari families in the country are considered as below poverty line. Okay, automatic exclusion. That means if your family have a AC, okay, you are excluded from all government subsidies by default. You get the point, right? If you are an income tax filer filing more than 10 lakhs income, by default, your Aadhaar card is ineligible for all government services. White ration, blue ration, gas subsidy, every subsidy will be automatically discontinued on your Aadhaar card. That is automatic inclusion, automatic exclusion. Then high entry, low barrier applies, right? So this is just creating the groundwork for all that thought process. Okay.
Always in the same platform. See, family has a radio and a bicycle.
Hmm.
They're excluded.
Hmm.
But there's another one, TV and a car.
Hmm.
But both put in the same.
Yes, that's it. That is why I said, right, it's a very subjective thing to call who are poor, and that is not the parameter government is using. The for better governance, better public service delivery, what gets measured gets improved. So I need to know how many people have only cycles, or how many people have only such, how many people are like this. But when it comes to public service delivery, I will still use Suresh Tendulkar committee report. Okay, so money is the benchmark for government. This is just for governance. That is different. This is different. Right now we are focusing on Bihar. Why? Bihar has a lot of poor people. How did I come to know? Because of all these things. Then what will I do? I will try to implement the policies in a fashion where Bihar. So that's only for direction. It's like knowing, right? Oh. Which state top good governance index? Gujarat is the leader in good governance index. If you see the poverty index, which state is having the least poverty? Kerala is having just 0.7% of its. So is other states. So South Indian states where education, industrialization, social inclusion, and all these things are very well, poverty is less. Now you understand the rise of certain political parties, which coincides with the color of the non-green color states. So-called Hindi belt. Yes or no? Are so-called Bimaru states. Bihar, Bimaru. You know Bimaru states? What are Bimaru states? Bimaru means in Hindi, Sikh. Okay. Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. All the states are considered as Bimaru states. Okay. B-I-M-A-R-U. Bimaru. Bimaru means Hindi, weak or poor. The coincide with the acronym Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. So all the Hindi belt states from there to there are considered as poor. Poverty is higher in states like Uttar Pradesh, Western Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. Okay. So as I keep saying, as a South Indian, we assume that roads, electricity, access to everything is a default thing. Okay. Those things are now coming to the North Indian states. Now North India is seeing what South India has seen in 2000s. What S.M. Krishna or Chandrababu Naidu has done to Andhra Pradesh 2000 is now being done to Uttar Pradesh like states in 2020. So that is why people are voting for certain political parties, not for any other reason. Okay. So the blame is purely on governance. For 75 years, these states were ignored. Let's just imagine a state with 50% of its population still being poor. Thanks to people like Lalu Prasad, who deliberately tried to keep the state in a dark. Why? The more the people are poor, ignorant, and uneducated, the better for me to social engineer. Yes or no? I can happily divide them on the basis of caste. Yes or no? Say, just think, if you go to Banjara Hills like area and say, you vote on the basis of Hindu, Muslim, and all these things, people won't even have the time to listen. Why? They are super rich, or they have all the amenities, or they are privileged. They don't care about all these things. Okay. But where will these things prevail? Beer, biryani, and paisa. This will work in poor areas. People will have a lot of time when you are poor, poverty, lack of infrastructure. So the beauty is when you mix polarization with the development, it's very hard to, very difficult to fight such kind of politics. You are satisfying both the needs. Yes or no? Again, just imagine, it's a very strong criticism. Between Amethi and the next big city. After 75 years of rule by Congress also, they never bothered to lay a road. Okay. When Nitish Kumar became CM in 2004 for Bihar, the first thing he has done is he has appointed 3 IAS officers and he has given them only one job: lay roads. Bihar should be covered in roads. That is the only thing he has done, and he was re-elected. You understand the power of lack of infrastructure, right? So if you see the map also, even today, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, all these states are still suffering from the same lack of development. They need electricity, they need development. And here also one more thing you need to remember: the South Indian states have already reaped demographic dividend. South Indian states are older states. Kerala is 32 plus, Andhra Pradesh is 30 plus. We are all older states. The average age of South Indian states is much higher than Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Bihar is 24, Uttar Pradesh is 26. Like this, they are much younger than South Indian states. So demographic dividend is now reaching North India. Okay. So if India grows, it grows only because of this belt. Make or break. Why? We have already reaped the demographic dividend. All South Indian states are have reaped. That is why we see whatever development we are seeing, right? If you go to Hyderabad right now, every day there are huge cranes and development. Why that development is happening? There is a lot of advantages. Okay. Whereas if you go to North Indian states, now they are reaping. Okay. Sorry? Rich make rich, or rich states will make more money. So Gujarat to Uttar Pradesh, the development is happening now in this particular area. Lot of growth. Development. Okay. So that is why I say small states are easy for governance. We should not have big states. When we make small states of the large states, it's easy to govern them. No? Here also we should have small states. Only then India will progress. My pet project. If I become Home Minister of this country, definitely I will do that. Lucky for India, they will not make me Home Minister, right? Okay. Why?
Unlucky for India.
Why? Having smaller states is more good for governance.
Yes, if they make it Prime Minister, then you'll.
Yeah. Okay. Making smaller states is an administrator. As an IAS officer, you will be happy to have more smaller states. Why? More smaller states, more districts, more collector vacancies. Yes or no? Okay. Just imagine, the Telangana is planning to create new districts.
Yes, sir.
So all those officers who are supposed to get promotion after 3 years, they got overnight promotion. They become IAS officers much early. I mean, they become collectors much earlier than they are supposed to. Okay. So. Administrative capacity, that the focus of the chief minister will be easy. You get the point, right? Like administering all the regions is a difficult burden. So you have a small territory, within that you have even smaller territories. So more and more people will be involved in the decision making. Okay. And politics won't come in the way. For example, if you take Andhra and Telangana, these two states, okay. So the people from this part of the city, or this part of the state, and this part of the state, this part have money, this part have power. Okay, they ignored this part. All of them are from the same state. So that is why the bifurcation happened. Yes, now happening. This part and this part are fighting. They want one more state. Yes. Okay, that should not happen. But the reason is Telangana now is developing because of the focus that they have on their own thought process. Okay. Again, as I told you, politics, development, and everything, demographic dividend, everything will come into one picture. That is how we have to solve the problems. Advantage is this part from 2000 to 2020, we did not have enough technology to promote the governance very quickly. Okay, but for this part of the country, we have a lot of technology right now. Everything can be done through dashboard governance, e-governance. Okay. So the speed will be very, very high to bring them out of poverty. More efforts can be done, objectively measured. Okay. Yes. And always think of democracy not in your lifespan terms, but in democracy lifespan terms. Democracies heal themselves. Democracies will solve themselves. For example, people are worried about polarization. Okay, Ram Temple, there are so many articles and all. What are the election issues of BJP in 2035? Yes or no? Till now, we had an issue with Ram Temple, Article 370. You don't have anything but to focus on governance. So democracies will heal themselves. Okay. Not from our lifetime cycle, but in democratic lifetime cycle. So when India reaches 100, it will solve a lot of problems she had. From then onwards, you cannot say a temple, right? You have to provide employment. It will be the natural outcome of development. So you can have the best of the both worlds. Right now you are having best of the both worlds. Then you will only have development and nothing but development, or else people will ask development. Yes or no? As I keep saying, nobody in Telangana, I haven't seen a single minister standing in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh and say, I will provide electricity to your village and give me votes. Do you hear that in 2020? Any minister saying, I will give you 24/7 electricity. It is assumed by default. Yes or no? Yes. So in Bihar, if I stand now and say I will give you electricity to your village, people will vote for me. So things will become normal. So after a point of time, Biharis will get electricity, roads, and so then they won't ask for roads and electricity. They will need that schemes which some South Indian states ministers are. Federalism we have covered, right?
No, sir.
Federalism issue. There was an article on
No, sir, we
federalism.
didn't.
I said I will skip that article, right? Federalism.
Yes, sir.
Fiscal federalism. There was an article in Hindu few days ago. You must have read that article.
Yes, sir.
Yes, right? Forgot also. What was the summary of that article?
It's the chronology of how the center is compromising states.
How the center is compromising the states. Okay. That's the summary.
Give states their autonomy.
Give states their autonomy. Okay. Anything else? Go to the article.
It talks about GST, sir,
Hmm.
how the compensation was denied.
Hmm.
And even when they asked that to increase the time for compensation, that was denied.
So in said force majeure.
Yes, of course, major laws. And he also talks about
Chadwar article is Gurtulega. Umang?
So it talks about non-divisible pool.
Non-divisible pool of
Cess and
taxation.
surcharges.
Cess and surcharges. Okay.
And when
Center is reaping all the cess and surcharges.
they're not compensating, they're allowing to get debts from. And
So all of you
even
are
pushing
convinced
it,
that the center is the villain.
kind of.
In
But
the article it was.
In the article it was written.
yes, sir, but the other side is that
Subsidy.
when states are given money,
They're using it as subsidies.
yes, sir, they're just pumping money.
So first we will understand the basic definition of federalism, right? Then we will move on to the simple solution, because the problem is all of cooperative federalism, competitive federalism, fiscal federalism, asymmetrical federalism, all these terms: competitive, cooperative, asymmetrical, fiscal federalism, types of federalism. So the article basically in Hindu says that central government has become more centralized. Okay. The constitution also provides a lot of freedom, and after that, after GST adaptation, GST constitutional amendments, even in fiscal terms we have become more or less centralized. Central is taking all the money, and it has increased the dose of cess and surcharge. Cess and surcharge is something that the states will never see a single rupee. Okay, it will be totally taken by the central government. Till then everything is fine. Okay, but we will see how federalism cannot be centralized because it has to be decentralized by default for operations. Okay, and second thing, what is the long-term solution? Now, hierarchical structure, central, state, or local self-government, they work hand in hand. That is what we call as shared sovereignty. Shared sovereignty. Okay, so the simplest diagram to remember this is, remember this. If you think of this border line, okay, let me highlight it. This is Indian boundary and Indian sovereignty. The green one is Indian boundary and Indian sovereignty. Yes, within that it is sharing it with whom? A, B, C, D, E, F, 6 states. So India have sovereignty. That sovereignty is again shared with whom? States.
Yes.
So A, B, C, D, E, F are states. So we have India, we have states within India, Within states we have yes or no? I hope you are able to understand. This is one state. This is one more state. This is one more state. So like that, within the country, we have states. Within states, we have districts. So these four are small districts. Now, where is district A1? Sovereignty, not in a hierarchical order, but in a horizontal order. That means district 1 have some functions to do, and who is having ultimate authority within district 1? District 1 only. The Gram Sabha. See, again, if I can split this into small villages. Okay, districts have villages, villages have Gram Sabhas. So there are certain functions that are given to Gram Sabha. There are certain functions that are given to district headquarters. There are certain functions that are given to A, and there are certain functions that are given to India as a whole. So within India, state, within state we have district, within district we have Gram Sabha. But all of them are not working in hierarchy, but they are working in shared sovereignty. They are sharing the same space. Clear? Now, when we say, we are saying that India, the green thing is not giving money to A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. What about the populist measures of D, E, F or A, B, C? States do not have any fiscal discipline of their own also. States are having a lot of fiscal deficit. States are having a lot of populist schemes. Okay. So it's easy to blame that central government is not giving to states. Definitely it's a mistake. Central government should work hand in hand. There should be a cooperative federalism, even in fiscal federalism. But they are not doing their right job. So central government has to be blamed, no doubt about that. At the same time, what did you do with the money that you have made or you have access to? So state governments also have equal blame to be taken, right? So state governments are not policy issues or developmental issues. Let's imagine India without road bumps. You know how much productivity will increase when all the roads are fantastic. Just imagine that there won't be any traffic jams. Just in front of our own institute, if you see, there is a lot of traffic jam. Why? To the left of the road is full of potholes, traffic jams, junction. But if every road is as smooth as, you know, a black carpet, there won't be any reason for the bike to slow down. Things will keep on flowing. Infrastructure, the smallest changes will make a huge amount of impact on the governance. People spend lakhs and lakhs of man hours in traffic jams every day in India. All the time can be used in productive purposes elsewhere. Okay, small changes, but states are not investing in that. Yes, why? They are wasting it on populist measures. Okay, so that is why Duvuri Subbarao, D. Subbarao, the former governor of RBI, he suggests something called as fiscal councils. Fiscal council, just like finance council, finance commission, we should have fiscal council. See, comptroller or auditor general of India will come and say, once you have spent the money, you have wasted the money, or you have utilized it correctly. That is after spending. Whereas fiscal councils are group of experts which will suggest the government while it is making the expenditure. Okay, so please read this 6 lines. Stable and sustainable public finances. Objective and scientific analysis. That means if you are spending some money, it should be some rationality behind that. Okay. Is it independent? Is it reviewed, monitored, and evaluating of government finances? Okay. Next one is budget projections. Okay. Most important thing, alternative policies. Okay, so fiscal councils. Fiscal Subbarao. Okay, D Subbarao, Duvul Subbarao. See why fiscal councils? That means let's imagine there is this insurance scheme. Government is spending 35,000 crores on insurance scheme. It's a fraud. All of us know that there is a lot of fraud within the insurance based schemes, Arogyasri, Ayushman Bharat, and all these things. But if the fiscal council says instead of this, spend only 20,000 in maintaining primary healthcare centers. Okay, government can not only save 15,000, but it will also provide better healthcare. Better healthcare. See, this is purely theoretical. No government will do that. But at least for the sake of answer writing, we can say there are better ways to spend public money. So in certain South Indian state, the chief minister, he or she is spending a lot of money on populist measures, giving money like water. Okay, then fiscal council might come and say that is not education. Invest in providing laptops, computers within the government schools, providing better amenities, providing digital boards, reduce digital divide, something like that. So the state might invest in such productive things. Again, purely theory rather than practice. No state government will never listen to any experts. Yes or no?
Their advice will also be not binding.
Their advisors will definitely be not binding because people have elected the elected representatives. So the mandate lies with elected representatives. Vote bank politics will also come into the picture. But at least opposition parties will have a objective data to criticize. And if there is a by mistake chief minister, accidental chief minister, just like accidental prime minister, who wants to listen to experts, he might have some empirical data. Right?
So isn't it a curse to a democracy?
Which one?
Yes, they are sovereign with elected representatives. Yes, they should have the decision making, but democracy empowers them, but those people do not listen to what exactly needs to be done.
I don't know, Aristotle or Socrates who said this when Oscar Wilde, I don't remember who said this. When good people don't participate in governance, they deserve to be ruled by scoundrels. Aristotle, right? Yes, Aristotle. So it's not the problem of the scoundrels, it's the problem of the good men who are being silent. It's not a curse of democracy, it's a curse of the people who are choosing them. We deserve this. Okay. There is this exactly to the point. Deterministic theories.
Even in Bahubali,
Which one?
చెడ్డవాడి దుర్మార్గం కంటే మంచివాడి మౌనం రాజ్యానికి పద్ధతులు ఎక్కువ డ్యామేజ్.
In Tagore also the same thing, right? Yes, the concept is the silence of good men is always a more dangerous thing to the society rather than voice of few. Okay. Again, this is purely theoretical. Don't worry, fiscal councils will never be implemented in this country. But you need some alternative solutions. How long we keep on blaming central government? How long we can blame the useless state governments? We have to have a solution. The solution is fiscal councils. That if we have a fiscal council either at central level or at state level, at least we will have some data to say this policy is waste, this policy is much better. We have to spend money here, we have to spend money here. UPSC aspirants will have more way forwards. That's the only solution, way forward. Clear? Fiscal federalism is a gone case. Both centers and states are misusing that. So there is no way to save this country. And all these things, we will attract more foreign direct investment. We will become a $5 trillion economy. Then we will redistribute the wealth to the states. Okay. So the only solution for all the problems in this country is $5 trillion economy. We have to become a $5 trillion economy as soon as possible, preferably in 2023 itself. Okay. So then we won't have a lot of problems.
So then you are saying Yada Praja Tada Raja. That is what you imply.
Which one?
Like people are silent. People deserve this. We deserve this.
It's a positive cycle, right? I create a useless society. Useless society creates useless leaders. Useless leaders will create useless societies. So we reinforce. Good people create good societies. Good societies create good leaders. Good leaders create again good societies. So it's a cycle, positive cycle. Negative cycle is I am silent, I am useless, I am creating a useless society. Useless society creates useless leaders. Useless leaders will create useless societies.
Then where do you think this vicious cycle will be broken?
Till we get H1B visa,